Hello, so it's Guilherme. This is a video that's part of a collection of videos that I'm recording based on my Spring Boot studies. Okay, so let me show you this one. So basically what I'm doing here, I'm studying using this tutorialspoint.com that I really appreciate. Those guys did a great job, and it's really an amazing resource if you want to start to study and dive deeper on those concepts and make the hands dirty, um, doing some codes and really exercising those concepts here. So what I did, I'm basically going through all of those topics here from this website. So what I'm going to show you today is the file handling that I did. Of course, I took um, I took the concept from this website, but I'm still doing some other research in other sources, such as the Building and other websites and other articles, books, and so on. Okay, so this guy here that I'm going to show you, the file handling, it's a branch inside of this repository called Spring Boot Studies that is present in my Bitbucket account. So if you take a look on this, I tried to explain and describe what I did. And this guy that we're seeing here, it's a screenshot from the application that I did. That's very simple. So I'm not worried about authorizations, authentications, and other aspects of web services, because those guys I'm taking care in other repositories. I mean, in other branches from this repository here, the Spring Boot Studies. For example, if you really want to handle API exceptions properly, I would suggest you to take a look on this guide that I did that basically does it pretty much good. So I tried to explain everything here. So let's take a look in what we really want to present here. We just want to handling files. So we just want to upload and download files, and in order to make this easier to test and also to present, I created this user interface that's very simple. It's just a couple of CSS and JS files with a bunch of JSP files. Okay, so let's take a look in the code now. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to do a overview with you about what do we have here. So let's start from the scratch. First, we have the main class that it's pretty much the Spring Boot application. There is nothing different here from what we used to do to start a Spring Boot application. So there is nothing different here. And now let's start showing the configuration files. First, I created this guy, the upload config class, in order to be in charge of configuring the multi-part properties, because like you can see, we want to limit the user the maximum file size, how many files in just one shot they are able to upload, and other properties here such as the location of those stored files. And those guys are being injected by Spring, of course, and you can see those properties here in the application properties file. And of course, those properties are configured to work locally in my local environment. So if you want to fork this project or even to clone this download, make sure to change those guys to work properly in your machine based on your local configurations. Okay, so basically that's it for this class. We also have another one, but this one is most focused in the web MVC configuration. So I call this web config, where I basically tell to the application where are going to be my view files, I mean the JSP files, like I tell you here, my resource for my view, and also where there are my static resources, such as the JS, CSS, and other static resources, images, etc. Okay, no big deal as well. Now, since we've covered all the basic stuff, let's start from our service. We are not storing something, I mean, in a database. So we are not using any kind of ORM or other, such as Hibernate or those guys, right? So we don't have a service layer. We don't have a repository layer. We just have a service layer. And I created this interface to be a contract for those service layers. Okay. That interface is implemented by this guy, the file upload service. And here I created this private method in order to make this more modular and easy to maintain, right? It's not a big deal, but you could also duplicate this code. I prefer to do that in a more clean way. So that's why I create this guy. So I just pass as parameter, I inject the file here, and then what it does, it's pretty much create the file and write the file in the storage based on the in the path of the temp directory. That's the place where are going to be stored those uploaded files. Okay, and here we have the method. This is the public method that's being used by the controller that receives a file, a single file, and store it. And then we have the second public method, that's the upload multi file, that basically receives, instead of one file, it receives a list, or better, an array of files, and iterate through those files and write those in the storage as well. Those guys return true, boolean, in case of succeed. And if something goes wrong, we have some throws here for the IO exception, file not found exception. And those guys, like I showed you, if you really want to cover those guys, doing any kind of exception handling, or also encapsulating the error response in the request, in the return of the request, you could take a look in this guy, but we are not going to do that on this example. But it's everything working and described in this repository here, exception handling, into my Spring Boot Studies repository. Okay, and this branch is taking care of it. Okay, let's continue here. Great, so this is our upload service class. There are just two public methods and the private one that's being used among those two guys. And another service is the one used for the download feature. This guy is a private method that is in charge of figuring out what is the MIME type of the file that we are trying to download. So I did that in order to be able to download any file. Doesn't matter what is the extension, what is the MIME type of this file. So that's why I need to do that in a more automatic way. So this private method is going to be used here in this public method that I call it download file, that receives the name of the file, and what it does is pretty much input stream resource into a resource object, and then I output this to the controller. So basically here at this point, using the header and so on, I return the file to the controller. That's why I'm able to download it through the browser, for example. So in this guy, the fetch file names from storage, this one is used and I'm going to show you the interface, the UI, in order to better explain to you what are those guys. Okay, so let's do a quick test here. First, let me see in my local storage directory if I have some other files that I already uploaded. So let's go in projects, file handling, src, apps, uploads. Okay, I do have something here, so I'm going to delete those guys. I don't want trash. Those guys came from another test. So I'm going to upload a text file, and now I'm going to choose a different extension, a zip file, and let's pick up a jar file. Okay, so we have three guys. We could have several of them. It's up to the client send those files to the request, but let's choose just three. Okay, so those guys, like you can see, they were correctly uploaded. Now, if you click in the download file, here it's where it comes to play this method that I showed you previously. So this guy here, what it does is basically fetch the files name that are placed in the storage. So those guys, like you can see, they are here in the storage. So this method iterates through those files and then interrogate the file object, asking what is the name of those files. And also, like you can see at line 82, 84, we are asking the file if it's the object, if it's a file or not, because this could be also a directory or something that we are not interested on. And like you can see, though, here are our files that this method returned for us. So I'm using this to populate this dropdown, and if I decide to download, I don't know, let's pick up another guy. Let's put a text file or a README that's it's easy to open, and let's download this guy. Let's download the README, for example, and check if the content of the file it's working. Yeah, it's working. It's pretty much what it was in the original file. And let's also pick up another one just to double check if it's being downloaded. So like you can see, the file, the size of the file, and also the extension itself, it's pretty much what we are expecting here. Okay, so this is the download serves layer. Okay, so since we've covered all the serves layers, let's go here in the controller. Okay, so this download controller, it's very simple. We have just the guy to return the MVC, the model view controller, this layout here, this page. Okay, so the file download form, and those guys, those JSP files, they are stored here, the web app. Okay, in this directory called view. Those are all the files that I have for this simple and minimalist example. So okay, and then we have this guy that, like you can see, it's a post. I could use the shortcut, but I decided to do that using the full request mapping syntax, but it's up to you. I'm just trying to exercise like I did here. I create the short version here. I used the short mapping to use the get, but then here, just to mix the stuff and exercise different things, I decided to use the normal version. I could call that like that. So okay, so we receive here the file, and then at this point we call the service. Of course, we could handle this exception, returning a proper response to the client, but again, it's out of scope. And Okay, this is download. It's just I just want the file and that's it. Return me the file and that's all that I want. So here in the file upload controller, that's is where there are the majority part of the code and the logic itself regarding to the controller layer. And again, we have a method to get to return the page itself, the main page, for the upload future. And then we have the upload file that receives the file itself, of course, and the model map object that's in charge to iterate with the user interface, populating the layout and so on. So probably you are already familiar with that, so it's not a big deal, and there are several other research that could help you to understand and move further in this subject. It's also in my repository if you want to take a look there. Probably at this point, when you look at this video, I will have even more topics covered in my repository here. I just have few of them, but that's because I'm really trying to do my best in order to dive deeper into those subjects. You know, I don't want to just read this, exercise a little bit, you know, doing some very short codes and then go to the next topic. I could do that, but I think I wouldn't be enjoying and learning as I could do if I was doing that like I'm doing right now. And okay, let's continue here. This is for the mood files, and we have several different ways because I could also upload the file, but let me show you the user interface again, the application itself, because let's navigate through our application a little bit, because here I have the mood files. Here I'm sending not just the file itself but also to other fields through the request pattern annotation. And here, instead of using the request pattern, I'm using the model attribute. What I mean by that is, instead of, let me show you here, instead of receive the names as a request parameter, like you can see here, the fields as a request parameter, such as the name and the mail, for this guy here, what I want is, I want to encapsulate this request into an object. This would be something like a request a model object or a request pattern. I know request pattern is much more than that, but that's the main idea here. So like you can see, this object, it's in the model folder. It's pretty much the name, the email, and the file. And like you can see, of course, this is going to match exactly with the form here. That's the name, email, and also the file. So let's come back here. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, the app init. This isn't very important because we are not handling date, I mean, and we are not also storing stuff. But this is implementing the application runner. So this is going to be executed after the Spring Boot application starts. So you could do something else here if you want to initialize something or whatever. But I just set the default time zone of this application to use the UTC. And what else? I think that's it. Apart from those static resources that are present here, we have a CSS file. It's very simple. There is no big deal. Also, the main JS file now it's empty. I decided to do that using the JSP syntax and features. I didn't use JS, but I added this in case of someone want to fork this code or clone this code and start to do something else with that, even though it's a very simple example. And yeah, I could also work in some tests here. I could also test my service layer. I could test my controller layer, but this is something that probably I'm going to take care in the next version, because like you can see guys, I still have a lot of work to do. I'm just here, but my goal is finish all of those topics and do several different brains and several different applications exercising each one of those concepts, and I hope at the end I will be able to tell that I did learn something. So that's it. So like you can see, please take a look on this repository here. This is my GitHub account, Guilherme Borges Bastos, and I can assure you that there are much more stuff there. And there's one that I really like. That's, let me show you here. Apart from these handling exceptions, that's really great. We have the interceptors, we have filters. Oh, I forgot, but I also created a filter here because I could do that through the interceptors, but I decided to do that before the controller, so I'm using the filter. And if you want to dive deeper on this subject, you can also take a look here. I draw this, and oh god, it was really hard to draw that, because not hard, but you know, a lot of work. And here I tried to explain what are the filters. What else here? What is the filter? What is the difference between Spring Boot handler interceptor versus servlet filters? And here finally we get our hands dirty, and I created an application that basically does what it's described here. For example, for this client, I want that request A goes through this filter transaction and also the out filter, and then reach the servlet A. But for the request B from this another client, I want something different. I want another filter chain flow, and that's what I tried to explain here. And again, this comes from a very simple example of the servlet filter here, but again, I tried to dive deeper on it in order to make this more complete, right? I really want to understand the things, the whys, and so on. So basically, that's it. Thank you very much.